The second that the safe parent actually steps in to protect their child, that is when the predator goes, aha, parental alienation.
Yeah. You are turning my child against me. Mm-hmm.
I'm a fabulous parent. And despite the fact that, I beat the shit out of you for years, or I coercively controlled you for years, or that I was mean or cruel, despite that, I'm a great dad, or I'm a fabulous mom.
My kids love me.
And they would love me, except you. Of course, everything's your fault.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Prey vs. Predator, the podcast. Again, we are thrilled for you to come and listen to us. We are so honored that you would lend us your ears. We're going to have another fabulous episode. I want to give a scenario to our listeners, and we're going to discuss it, and then you will find out what we are discussing as we go along here. So it's a bit of a riddle, but listen, post-separation prey want to be left alone and be allowed to move on with their lives. They want as little to do with predators as possible. But predators, however, need supply. First of all, what does that mean? Predators need supply.
So I had a thought about supply. I recently read a book by M. Scott Peck. He wrote The Road Less Traveled. But this book that I read is called People of the Lie, and it's hope for healing of human evil. And I actually read it as sort of a way for me to process what was going on in the Middle East conflict. He was talking about what makes a person evil, and what stood out to me was that Peck believed that evil probably originates within some sort of trauma in childhood, and that the trauma works itself out in that the ego must be protected at all costs. And then as the person grows up, even if they're not in a situation where their ego needs to be protected at all costs, they create situations where their ego needs to be protected. So for a predator, supply is the prey. And when the prey has been removed from their life, there goes their supply. So they need to create situations where the prey is still around and there is still drama that works itself out in the predator needing to protect his ego.
So the supply is almost like what they feed off of.
Yeah, that's right.
What they need to thrive, what they need to live, what they need to, if you're thinking of the imagery of a vampire.
Yeah, vampire energy, I've heard it called.
Yeah, suck the life out of it. So what is those things? Conflict could also be something that they thrive on.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're engaging with another person. They need to be the victim. They need to, once you've separated from them, they need to engage in ways to create drama.
That's exactly what it is. Create situations where they need to protect their ego.
And
That's
maybe
drama.
Give them a sense of power.
Right.
And control.
Yeah.
And maybe even punish the prey for
Absolutely.
leaving. So again, post-separation, the prey want to be left alone and move on with their lives. And they want nothing to do with the predator, but the predator needs supply. And they do this, they maintain their supply in many ways. And one of the ways we want to talk about today is how predators use the ignorance of lawyers, judges, psychologists to maintain their coercive control by, and this is just one way they do this, parental alienation. How do they do this? Because this is a massive topic, and we are just talking about one of the ways that predators abuse the prey after the separation.
PJ, you have talked about parental alienation before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us.
Introduce our listeners, because most of us will not have heard about this.
No, and Amber, I think
it sounds horrible.
I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of what you just see this pattern repeated. You'll see the prey just always trying to escape and get out of conflict, and you will see that the predator just drawing them back into conflict to just keep that power, keep that control, keep that domination over them. Like, I'm going to wreck your life. I'm going to make your life miserable. I'm going to hurt you family court is a place where you can ruin somebody's financial future. You can prolong. Everything takes years. So you can be in this person's life.
So it's not even about winning a court case. It's about just prolonging the experience of court.
No, yeah. I mean, that's such a great point. Like, it's not about winning. It's about control and domination and just like screwing with the prey.
Making them pay.
Making them just like, I still am significant in your life. I can still hurt you. I still have power over you. You still report to me and my lawyer. And the judge. Like, so it's this tremendous, and like, this is a big topic.
Yes.
Big topic. Statistically, 90% of people who try to get away from, or do manage to get away from the predator, 90% will get drawn into this post-separation abuse. I mean, that's a huge, significant.
It's ridiculous. And why aren't we hearing more about this?
We just don't, because, prey think that they get like, you're going to divorce or separate and you're finally free. And in many ways you are. But in many ways, the predator comes back to sort of just try to draw out every last, bit of energy that you've possibly got.
And you can't be done with a relationship, say, a destructive relationship that's not healthy, if there's children involved, because the relationship has to be there.
Right.
So in a way, this parental alienation is now being used as a way of keeping this unhealthy supply happening for the predator.
Yeah, and we're just...
So I think our listeners need to know what a definition of parental alienation, because it sounds horrible.
And, we tried to find definitions online, which is so funny. But I think what's really fascinating is the definitions online are quite clearly created by predators.
They're very biased.
Like, it's actually quite stunning. So essentially what happens in what's called parental alienation is the kids, one or more of the children involved decides that they don't want to spend time with the predatory parent anymore. And the child isn't going to use that language. The child may just say, like, I don't want to
hang out with mom.
Yeah, the parent's abusive, or I don't like it. I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable. The child is just most of the time just speaking their truth, just speaking what they feel comfortable with. This creates an anger in the predator because those are my children and my children have to like me, and
we need to be 50-50 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you have like this, like across the board, you have these parents who have never invested in their kids for years and years and years. You get into a post-separation abuse, and all of a sudden they have to have 50-50, and they're fighting with all they have to get that 50-50. The children naturally are going to, quite often, most of the time in healthy relationships, kids love mom, they love dad, they love parent A, they love parent B. Like the vast majority of situations, the kids are going to really love both parents and find value in both parents. But especially when it comes to coercive controllers, because they have a very almost, even though they can be quite charming on the surface, in intimate relationships, there tends to be a very self-centered coldness to them. And the kids, when the prey is taken out of the situation, the kids are left alone with the predator. The kids often start to realize or catch on, especially as they get older, that this person's not safe.
Well, and there's no buffer anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no buffer between me and this parent who maybe doesn't know how to parent me, or it's not fun over at mom's place, or it's whatever. Mom, dad, doesn't matter.
The vast majority of time it is mom being the safe parent and dad being the coercive controller. But vast might be like, and I'm making this statistic up, so please nobody quote me on it, like say 70-30, right? But even if it was 50-50, what you don't see is you don't see a ton of women going to court. That could be for this type of thing. It could be financial. It could be just a power-based thing, but you do see a ton of fathers going to court.
So you're saying that this parental alienation is vastly in the majority of used by men.
Used by men, yeah.
Against women.
Against the women. That's what you see. And what happens in the court is the court thinks that families, for the most part, it kind of sees families as normal. It sees families as healthy. So when you have a situation where you have this prey parent, the prey parent sees the prey, don't forget, the prey parent has been abused in the relationship. So the prey parent's not under any illusion that this person doesn't abuse. So their kids are coming home saying, dad abused me, or sometimes mom's abusing me. So this makes sense. Yeah, that's what this person does. This person's an abusive.
And when we say abuse, it doesn't mean it's like punching
always
or
physical.
It doesn't mean physical. It could be, I don't know, like
and
maybe
kids
they
might
opened
not...
my bag without me saying that they could, I've got my book bag and they just went through it, and I said no.
Because kids don't always, kids don't necessarily have a language for
we don't have, like, us as adults, like we do this podcast to help us as adults have the language, yet alone expecting our kids. So the kids will say things like, I don't want to go to dad's, I don't want to go. Then we've got this situation where the safe parent is trying to force the child to go.
Yeah, turning them somewhat into a predator.
Right. Now the safe parent has a choice. Am I the predator now, forcing my child to go to this abusive parent? Or do I just say, listen, Johnny doesn't want to come? The second that the safe parent actually steps in to protect their child, that is when the predator goes, aha, parental alienation.
Yeah. You are turning my child against me.
I'm a fabulous parent. And despite the fact that, I beat the shit out of you for years, or I coercively controlled you for years, or that I was mean or cruel, despite that, I'm a great dad, or I'm a fabulous mom.
My kids love.
And they would love me, except you. Of course, everything's your fault as the prey, right? The predator will always accuse the prey of it being their fault. So that person will then take them to court. So now we've got this prolonged, at minimum, a minimum of a year of waiting for this elusive court date. Very often, and that they will say, this person's alienating them from me. Now we have lawyer fees, we have court costs. We often have, in Canada anyways, we have this report called a 211, where we'll ask a psychologist to come in, and these cost between about $25,000 to $45,000, where this person is now, this psychologist is supposed to come and with 2 5-hour visits to mom's house and dad's house, supposed to catch all these coercive control behaviors. Well, we know darn well from what we talk about, there is no way, if you don't know what coercive control is, you don't have a hope in Hades of really being able to identify this behavior. You just see a nice mom and a nice dad. And when you see this nice mom and the nice dad, and you see these kids saying, I don't like dad, for example, or, I don't like mom, it would make sense to them
that other parent is turning them against.
Right. So it kind of makes sense of its own. It's okay, yeah, that would make sense.
Well, it's kind of like even in the media right now, you see this stuff with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Great example.
And he is, it's now come out a 2-year-old tweet from one of his sons calling his dad some names and saying he doesn't feel safe, or a lot of his siblings don't feel safe at dad's house. And you read that, and I'm a grown woman, and I want to believe that Brad Pitt is a great dad.
Me too.
But reading that and knowing what I know, I'm like, you have to believe the children.
Yeah.
And that's where now it's a bit of a grief for me, because I like Brad Pitt as visually, he's beautiful. But I have to believe that child for maybe not feeling safe there.
And that's such a good example, because you can see how you want to believe that he's a good dad.
Oh, yeah. The image would be even better.
Looks like a good dad, acts like a good dad. And you actually want to believe in good dads.
And you kind of want to believe that maybe this woman has turned her kids against, their good dad.
Because she's very thin.
And beautiful. And stunning. But it's like,
and stole him from his
for Jennifer Aniston, his real true love.
Yeah. So it's such a messy situation, but yet it's not messy when you go, let the kids say what's going on for them.
Well, and that's again this powerful archetype of the woman being manipulative, and it preys on this kind of misogynistic. And who do we have mostly as judges?
Men,
yeah.
Right? And so it preys on this like misogynistic archetype of the woman being, like underhanded and sneaky and manipulative and trying to hurt. We divorced and now I'm going to get him back by saying he sexually abused our kids and I'm going to get him back by doing this. And so it really starts this logic starts making its own sense unless we actually trust the kids.
So this is a great segue into where did this term come from? Parental alienation.
Oh, I know. There was a guy, his name was Richard Gardner.
Yeah.
PJ, you've talked about him before.
I don't even want to get started on this topic because I feel like it's like for
just a little minute Coles Notes version.
Okay, you know what? I actually have. Okay, Richard Gardner is a psychologist, and he coined the term parental alienation.
He's been dead for 20 years. He killed himself.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing that his name will get used in these psychologist reports that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. His name will come up. Oh, Richard Gardner coined the term parental alienation. There is, first of all, there is no evidence that this exists. There's no evidence. And when I say there's no evidence this exists, sure, a parent can manipulate and coerce a child. Yeah. We're not trying to say it's not a possibility.
And that's why it's good to have the 211s or whatever. They go into the homes and
and
see the family situation.
So it's not saying like, oh, a parent is not capable of bad mouthing the other parent, especially when kids are younger. However, this whole parental alienation has become like a movement. So Gardner created this movement. Essentially, it's alleged he created this movement to defend pedophiles. So for those who are going like, no, that's not true, I just want to give you, here's a quote from Richard Gardner himself. And this is from a paper that he wrote called Sex Abuse Hysteria. Salem Witch Trials Revisited. And this is in relation to pedophilia. So here's a direct quote from this paper. It is of interest that of all of the ancient peoples, it may very well be that the Jews were the only ones who were punitive toward pedophiles. Our present overreaction to pedophilia represents an exaggeration of Judeo-Christian principles and is a significant factor operative in Western society's atypicality with regard to such activities.
Atypicality.
Right.
So they're saying that most societies
are totally
okay with it.
Like
it's atypical that we're against it.
It's the exaggeration of these principles, these Judeo-Christian principles. So Judeo-Christian principles are over-exaggerating the damage. I'll give you one more little quote. This is from a different paper, I believe. The quote is, "The draconian punishments meted out to pedophiles go far beyond what I consider to be the gravity of the crime."
Okay, so how does that relate
to
the topic at hand?
So basically, here you have these men sexually abusing their kids. You have the moms and the kids going, don't want to be with dad. I'm being sexually abused. And you have this new person who doesn't believe, this Gardner, doesn't really believe that it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. So essentially he's saying like these moms are really hysterical. And you know what? Moms are kind of hysterical anyways. This not about abuse. The mom's making it up, or sometimes it might be true.
Blowing it out of proportion.
Definitely, even if it was true, probably blowing it out of proportion because she just doesn't want dad to have access to the kids.
And it's kind of implying that the children are okay with the access to the situation that's going on with the dad. The kids should be okay with it because, pedophilia.
Incest happens? What?
Yeah.
Well, and this is where there's these overtones that are so heinous. Like it's so awful. And yet you will find reporters, psychologists referencing this guy in almost every single report they write.
And
he's referenced. Now, they don't read enough to know that this is what the basis is. They just, hey, this sounds good. And let me check and see if there's parental alienation going on because this person's saying there is.
And he was a psychologist, so he knows.
Well, and it's interesting because it doesn't mean that any parent that uses this against if the predator parent is using this, doesn't mean that they're sexually assaulting their child.
No.
So it's turned into...
Yeah, it's turned into its own industry.
Yes.
But I'm just saying this is the root of it,
yeah,
right?
It's good to know.
This is the root. And so that's what a lot of like fathers groups have really bought into this and they really have pushed like APA to include it in the DSM, which is like the diagnostic statistical manual, which is where therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists gets all their diagnoses, but it hasn't been included for a good reason. Now the UN has come out against this. The Australian government has started to make a big push against this. There's laws that are coming out now to prevent this. But in the meantime, an entire industry has popped up. This is where if you have interest in this, if you want to go down this rabbit trail at all, one of the people doing the greatest work in our opinion is Tina Swifton. She
One Mom's Battle?
Yep. She runs One Mom's Battle. You find her on Instagram under One Mom's Battle. And she is almost single-handedly changing or giving a voice to these parents who are trying to get out of a situation. We interviewed Dr. Cocciola, who also does some work in this area. There are a lot of people. I think Tina Swifton is probably one of the people to follow if this is something you can kind of want to know more about. But I think it's really important that we cover this because this is happening to prey all over the place. And now we have the secondary level of the kids being used as pawns.
Right.
And so this has really devastated without the courts having an understanding of course of control, without lawyers having an understanding, without psychologists having an understanding of course of control. What you see on the surface, a parent trying to innocently have access to his or her children. And the undercurrent is somebody who is using all of these people and systems to maintain power and control.
Yeah, and I've heard of reunification camps. And is that where they try and bring the kids and the predator parent back into a shiny, happy relationship?
Okay, so this is fascinating. Like, this hasn't been done in the U.S., but there was a study done in Canada, and it found that judges mandated family reunification programs. 20% of all family court cases where there was an allegation of alienation. So the researcher actually, I'll have a quote from the researcher who says, anyone can hang a shingle on their door in terms of being a reunification counselor.
Really?
So you don't even have to have a degree.
What?
Yeah, because there's no research, there's no science. So people are saying like, come to our program. It's like 100% guaranteed or 92% guaranteed, and there's no outside. Like, that's just what they're telling you. It's like, eat this Big Mac. It's 98% healthy, So says McDonald's. Like, it's the Wild West. And that's what this researcher anyways had called it, though, like literally the Wild West out there. And so you have these judges thinking, because what doesn't sound fantastic about family reunification camp? Now, think this through, because how this works within the predator's hand. An industry has popped up based on Gardner's this theology. It is a theology of sorts.
Yeah.
Based on this kind of line of thinking, this industry has popped up to support the predator. So the predator essentially, remember we said he doesn't care about winning, or she? They don't care about winning. They just care about prolonging the trauma and drama and ego.
That's right.
The industry pops up because they will do anything to maintain their drama.
Cash flow.
And so they will pay any amount of money. So these camps pop up, and lo and behold, these camps support the predator.
Yes, they do.
Because you go into the camps and the kids, again, Tina Swifton.
And is it actually a camp?
Yeah, some of them are actually like camps.
Like a week long.
Yeah, usually, and they usually cost upward $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
Oh, wow.
But of course, no fee. But in order to go to the camp, the judge has to be, the predator parent has to be given full custody of the children.
Courts for that week or for the 2 weeks?
Just for the purpose of the reunification camp. But because courts are delayed by a year, that means the predator parent, before they can get equal parenting time again, they have to go to court again, which can take a year, 2 years.
So the prey parent loses control.
Total custody of the child through no fault
for a year.
For sometimes 2, 3, 4 years.
So
Sometimes
the child doesn't want to be with mom or dad, but
and
they're forced to live with that mom or dad for a year.
Because the custody changes and then the predator doesn't, because they assume the predator will give the child back and share custody once they work it out. Now, the reunification camps will do things like tell these kids, and if you follow some of the stuff in the news right now, this is all over the news, thanks to Tina Swifton, which we'd love to have on our show because of the great work that she's doing. When the kids go to this camp, the camp will use predatory behaviors on the kids. Things like you will agree that you are being brainwashed by your parent, the safe parent, or you will not be returned to the safe parent. So the child becomes, and this is where it's unregulated. So they are there, they exist to support the predator parent.
It's like conversion therapy.
It is so much like
I kept
conversion
thinking about
therapy.
that. It is. It feels like that, doesn't it?
And who did the conversion therapy support? It supported the parent who wanted the child to be different.
Yeah.
It didn't support the child.
Right.
In any way, shape, or form. It existed for the predator. So this exists for the predator. So it is all designed to meet the needs and make the predator happy and have the predator walk away with his children, or sometimes her children, saying, look at that, you were brainwashed. And you agreed that you were brainwashed. And the kids are told things repeatedly like, you will go to jail, or your safe parent will go to jail if you don't make amends with this parent.
Wow.
Add to that these horrific scenes, which actually One Mom's Battle has on her Instagram, and you can watch them, or YouTube.
YouTube, you can watch.
There's even a documentary, I think, on this if you watch, where these camps will send out, at the judge's orders, they will send out like 4 burly men to go in the middle of the night to pick your kids out of their beds, drag them out, shove them into vehicles and drive them off in the middle of the night.
I remember I actually watched it, and it's horrific. But you see these kids, their friends, try to protect them from being dragged away because they didn't want to do reunification camp
and
with their mother.
And they're fighting and screaming.
And they ran away.
Yeah.
And they would rather live on the run than people actually believing these kids, these teenagers, these young adults, saying where they want to live.
Well, it's just like, it's absolutely stunning. Now, that's the bad news. That's kind of the Wild West of what has been happening in family court at the hands of predators. Basically, the predators have started running family court.
And I want to just add, I found there's a Guardian thing about it, and it's called Parental Alienation and the Unregulated Experts Shattering Children's Lives.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about the fact that it's unregulated.
Well, I mean, you scrape the surface of this stuff, and it is absolutely mind-blowing that this is allowed to happen in our day and age where children are supposed to be protected. But this is what happens when you have an ignorance in an institution of course of control. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that there are enough voices and enough movement and enough momentum that there are so many new laws because these kids are growing up and using their voice. People like Tina Swifton, like ourselves, like other advocates are starting to advocate for the UN has come out very strongly against parental alienation, against the use of it, against the term, against the practice, against the courts allowing it. And that's like
really great.
Absolutely stunning and have come out so strongly. And there are a number of laws. And sadly, almost every single law that's been created in the last little while is named after a child whose parent has killed them.
Yeah.
So
I know in Canada there's a Kira's law.
In Canada there's one Kira's law, little girl Kira who lost her life. Kira's mom was a physician, and Kira's mom fought, I think, like almost a dozen judges heard the case. And one judge said, and in her case, she was physically abused, and the judge said literally something along the lines of, "Yeah, you were abused, but I'm not gonna. That has no bearing, on parenting." And so totally dismissed it. And then another judge, right close to the time that the child was killed, Kira's mom had gone to yet another judge and pleaded her case. And the judge said, "Yeah, it's compelling what you're saying. Kind of has some ring of truth to it, but nothing that should prevent access to the child." Well, before she could go to another judge, like 2 weeks after that judge had said that, the child was dead.
Yeah.
And so it is heartbreaking that this is the cost of what's going on in order to get new laws. But the heroism, the courage of these parents using the death of their children to try to prevent other deaths and other pain and other incredible traumas from happening to their kids is just so profound and just a tremendous gift to pray everywhere. And
I want to say, these cases, these laws that are created from the death of children, that's not every situation when this parental alienation is used, but it's not to say it's not less traumatic,
right,
for the child. It's still very traumatic. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like the physical abuse is obviously traumatic, but the emotional abuse is just as traumatic. Maybe it doesn't result in death, but there is trauma to the children and even to the prey parent in this situation.
Well, and that's the thing. Like you just have these layers, know, and that's why I say, we're gonna touch on the tip of the iceberg today. Like, so we're not going to
topic.
We're not diving into this in any great detail at this point, but we would like to, and we'd like to hear more of your comments from listeners out there. If you want us to explore these areas, we'd love to do more deep dives into this. And it's not to scare. What I don't want to do is I don't want to scare prey parents away from getting out of abusive situations, because I think of all the people we've interviewed here at PVP, I don't think one, even though almost all of them have been through some kind of post-separation abuse, I don't think any of them have said they wish they were back, right? So despite all of the trials and tribulations, I think that it is worth getting out of the situation.
Getting your children out.
Because, and trying to get them out, just being aware that it doesn't end. And the more that we speak about it, the more that we get angry and use our voices and advocate, the more that the courts might hear, the reporters, the psychologists, the more we will understand coercive control, the better we will be able to deal with these things in our systems of care.
I think the history is really important, and thank you for providing that for us and our listeners.
And we call out that there is no regulation for coercive control camps or counselors. We call that out today. That's not okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you for
this, you guys.
Thank you, guys.
for listening.
So
and
important.
#PrayPower.
#PrayPower.